He'll rise again, and that'll be the Antichrist, and all sinners will go to hell. Everyone else will go to heaven.
Was that there's a story in Revelations that talks about different signs of the world that are going to predict the second coming.
The book of Revelations, he promises to return and rule the earth with an iron rod.
I think there's something about him coming in the night, and then he's going to rule the world for 1,000 years, and then take people to heaven.
The whole idea of the end of time is a fundamental Abrahamic religion idea, right? I mean, Christians, Jews, Muslims all believe this. So that's always been part of Western civilization. So the idea that there could be an end of an age was very popular in the history of Christianity.
The end of the world, as we know from the Christian tradition, has to do with the second coming of Jesus Christ, also known as millennialism. The story itself, as we might have guessed, comes from the Bible, and it is called millennialism because it is stated in the book of Revelations that there will be a period of 1,000 years that humans will reign with Jesus. So, the Millennial Tale has to do all about Jesus. But to understand in perspective, let's go to the timeline. According to the believed story, millennialism is actually 1,000 years before judgment, right at the end of our timeline. Yet, according to academic experts on the matter, the story we know has not always been believed as we know it. Even though the books of the New Testament had been written between the 1st and 2nd century, the first understanding of the end of the world came by Catholic Franciscans in the 13th century.
Joachim de Fiore, who basically has a very unique interpretation of the final book of the New Testament, the book of Revelation. He defines it in these three epochs. And there's sort of the epoch of Adam to Jesus, then the epoch after Jesus, which we're in now, and then he thinks then there'll be the second coming, and it'll be the third epoch, the epoch of the true church.
It may look complicated, but it is much more simpler than it is now. The Millennial Tale as we know today really started to develop in the midst of the 16th century, after the Protestants broke with the Catholic Church in Europe. It is obvious that the Puritans would develop this story since they wanted to be raptured after so much tribulation and persecution.
The Puritans of the 17th century, they didn't expect that they would be raptured out of the world before tribulations that would take place before those events. That's a relatively recent event.
What? But isn't this story clear in the Bible?
That really arose in the 1800s and became very popular among 20th century American Protestants.
Okay, so it turns out that there are multiple versions of millennialism, but from all, a root base can be taken from the three kinds of millennialism: premillennialism, postmillennialism, and amillennialism. The premillennialists believe that Jesus will come before these 1,000 years. The postmillennialists believe that Jesus will come after the 1,000 years of reign. Finally, the amillennialists believe that the 1,000 years in the book of Revelation is not to be understood literally but metaphorically. If not the Bible, then what determines how this story plays? Branching off the three kinds of millennialism, there is an incredible amount of millennialist theories that it is impossible to keep up.
The Bible's not clear about this event at all, but the Bible has all sorts of detailed prophecies about the future.
Here's a couple things to keep in mind about the book of Revelation. One, it's a book that's read in it's in code. right? So you have things, the horsemen of the apocalypse, the whore of Babylon. And because it's sort of written in code means it's by the structure of the book, it's always open to interpretation, right? So a historian could say, oh yeah, this is obviously a denunciation of Emperor Nero and, looking back at him burning Rome. Or this is something about the sign of the times by the end of the first century and the time of crisis and oppression that Christians are facing on the heel of the Roman Empire. Or it's open to sort of say, like many evangelical Pentecostal ministers did after 9/11, after the terrorist attack on the Twin Towers and the Pentagon, and sort of them being able to see this is one of the signs of the times, and then sort of making forecasts, like weather forecasting.
Like weather forecasting, the answer really depends on historical events along with transcultural social context, and each century society experienced different realities. Let's say, for instance, if we pick an average Christian in the year 1400, his or her version was amillennial. If we pick another Christian in the year 1600, the millennial version was certainly of post-millennial kind. If we pick another Christian in the year 1800, then his understanding would be premillennial. Today, the most popular version is called dispensationalism, which is a form of premillennialism. This is the official version of the bestseller books series and movies Left Behind, and is the one most Christians associate with when it comes to a version of the Millennial Tale.
Now, one can use the Bible, particularly these speculations about apocalyptic events, to support all sorts of different political views. So during the Cold War, for American Protestants, the Soviet Union, Communist China, they always represented particular beasts or forces of Antichrist, found, detailed in the Book of Revelation and in other parts of the Bible. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, it made sense for Protestants to look for new enemies that might fill those roles, and perhaps they would find them, say, in the Middle East. So the basic beliefs remain somewhat similar throughout those time periods, but new forces kind of take different roles, or those beliefs about the end times get reinterpreted.
History affected and will keep affecting the tendency of the Christian interpretations. Ironically, we are writing history as we go. Here is where the range of disciplines of the social science can help us comprehend this very religious belief in a deeper level. Actually, any social phenomenon for that matter. From a socio-psychological perspective, for instance, the Millennial Tale can help us discover internal behavior that triggers to believe, interpret. From an economical perspective, we can analyze how significant this belief moves our economy. From a social justice perspective, how does this belief play out in the legislation and international policies? So on and so forth. The sensational story of the second coming of Jesus may look simple and almost an imaginary story at the surface, but certainly it can have deeper implications.